Great. So, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm really excited to be talking to you today about the Syllabus Assistant. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Jessie Ransom. I'm the product manager for Leganto. Um, and what we're going to cover today is really just an overview of the Syllabus Assistant. I'm going to talk about what we have today in more detail than you've probably gotten up to now based on some of the questions that we've gotten up to now. And I also want to give you an idea of where we're going, what's coming over the rest of the year. Please do share any feedback that you have or any questions that you might have. You should be able to use the chat to do that. It doesn't have to necessarily be questions. So as I go through, some of the things that we have or some of the things that we're planning to do, if you have feedback or you have concerns, feel free to put that in as well. I'd be really happy to hear from you, or things that you think would be helpful for your peers. Feel free to use the chat for that also. Just so you know, I'll be sending out a survey when I send the recording. We're recording the webinar, and when I send the recording, I will also include a survey. And I think it's 5 questions long. It's anonymous, but it's really about what you need related to the Syllabus Assistant. What would it need to have for you to be able to use it, for example, general feedback, that type of thing. So we would really appreciate your feedback, your responses. And I'll probably mention this several more times as we go through. So with that, let's go ahead and just dive right in. And I'll start with what we have already in the Syllabus Assistant. And just in case, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So just an introduction. I apologize for those of you who have seen this or been playing with it yourselves. But the idea here is exactly what you see on the slide, is to be able to create a list in Leganto from a file. So you can upload a file that contains, existing information about what belongs on the reading list or what's going to be used in the course, and turn that into a Leganto list. And based on the file, the original file. I'm going to walk through this really quickly, just again, so that we can all be on the same page here. So if you've seen this, my apologies. But the idea is that I can start with an existing file, and this is the sample file that I'm going to use. It has information about the course. There's a section here that has required materials. Scrolling down, there's a lot of other information not relevant for Leganto, and then there are some weekly resources here. And sometimes we see really extensive references like this one with the DOI, but a lot of times we also see partial references. That's what we're calling them. So this Watch the Power of Storytelling, Stunk Chapter 1, and then the chapter title. And the idea is that you can use all of these different types of references, or we're scanning for all of these different types of references. And then once you have a file like that, you can upload it into Leganto. It will use AI to scan the file and identify those different references from the file. And once it completes this process, you can see here that it found 14 items, and I can create a list here. And the list is all of those references. So in this case, there were kind of 2 places where they were. I had the required materials section that had 2 items on it. And then I also had the weekly sections down below. And so the structure in Leganto is exactly the structure that we saw on the original file, pulling out all of these different references from the original file, ordering them in the same order that we had before, and pulling in all of this information. So that's the idea behind the Syllabus Assistant. If you haven't seen it yet, this is something that's available for you to start using today, to start testing today. We released it as a beta release, meaning it only displays to library staff, and there are some things that don't work related to it. So I'll go through those in more detail just to kind of give you all the knowledge that we have about it. But I want to start by talking a bit more about how it's actually designed to work, because I am getting some questions that are things like, am I expecting too much? Should it be doing this? So I want to talk a bit about how it is built to work, so that if it's doing what it should be doing, if it's going to work for you. So we're using generative AI to scan the syllabus file. So we're scanning the file, and looking for all references to course materials or to assigned materials for the course. I'll go through a little bit more about exactly what that means, but we're also looking for the different section headers like you saw in the example that I just showed, and then organizing those references according to the section that they're in within the original file. There's also a step where we are augmenting partial references with additional information where it's somewhere else in the file, and I have a couple of examples of that I can show as well. And then the last step is to find or assign a list name. So if the list or if the file has a course name at the top, it'll pull that information. But if it doesn't, it will make one up. So it'll make up a name for the list based on the topics or the content, the themes, I guess, of the course or of the resources that are part of that course. That's all using generative AI to scan the file. And then the second piece is the Leganto piece. So Leganto, this is what Leganto does anyway, but Leganto will then create a reading list with that information, with the list name, with the sections, with the references that go in those specific sections, and attempt to link it to the library collections. And I'll also go into more details about how that works and what I mean by attempt. But I do want to also talk a bit more about what we're talking about in the first place when we talk about a syllabus, because I know that this is not terminology that's used everywhere. So when we're talking about a syllabus, we're talking about a file that contains references to materials that students should read for their course, watch, listen to, the types of things that would belong on a Leganto resource list. It's specifically trained not to just look for everything. So I don't know if you noticed, but in that file that I showed in the first example, the bottom had like helpful links or something like that. It's designed not to pull those out. It's designed not to pull out like the link to the university's uh, code of conduct policy, or those additional things that might be in a file about a course but wouldn't be relevant for a Leganto list. It is also right now supporting files in PDF, Word, or text format. I had somebody ask me if we're planning other formats, but I haven't so far heard about a specific need. So if you are getting this information in a different format, feel free to let us know. But that's what we have right now. I have this kind of caveat at the end. It's not necessarily any file that contains references. I think when we originally released this, or when I was talking about it in the roadmap, I was using that phrase, like any file that contains references. But now that I'm seeing a couple of examples of what some of you are testing, as people have sent me files, I can see that that's a little bit too broad. So I can talk about that in a little bit more detail as well. But I have a couple of samples here to give you an idea of, exactly what we are talking about when we talk about these types of files. This is your files or customer files that people sent me to look at where something was wrong. And so I've blurred out all of the confuseful information. I blurred out all the references or tried to anonymize these as much as I could. But the first one here it's structured into a table. And so it has like these numbers here, and then the themes, and then this says please tag as essential, and this says please tag as recommended. And then there's different references within within this table. And this is something that would be supported with the Syllabus Assistant, where it's able to see, for this topic, there are 4 references kind of structured into these 2 columns. We are seeing a lot of examples that use tables, and generally I would say it's working very well for tables. I have another example here where there's a lot of information about the course itself, and then down here there's a required reading section and a supplementary reading section. So again, it's able to look at this whole file or this whole table and identify the relevant sections here, and we're just getting the one reference to that section. So another example using a table certainly doesn't have to be a table, and it doesn't have to be this full course file. So I have another example here that is reserved for a specific course, and it's just an alphabetical list of the, I don't know, oh here, 48 different resources that are part of this list. Same thing, works just fine. You should be able to pull these references out of the file. So we are seeing a lot of variety in terms of the types of files that are supported here, the structure of information that's supported here. So in terms of, I think I got a question that was like, am I expecting too much that it would pull this out of this type of file? I would say generally speaking, no. That is what we're aiming for, that regardless of how the file is structured, regardless of how the references are structured, we should be able to identify that those would belong on a resource list. However, it's not any file that includes references. And here's an example of an article, just an academic article, and at the end of the article are all of the references. And this is not the type of file that it is designed to work with. It is specifically trained to look for, or specifically prompted to look for the types of things that would belong on a Leganto list. Assigned course materials, materials that students are directed to read for their course. And that's not the case in a file like this. I saw a couple other examples along these lines where you may be trying to test, just a list of references because that's what you have and you want to see how it works. But it is really looking for like assigned course materials specifically. So that's something to be aware of as you start playing with it. Is it's not necessarily any file that contains references. As I had said previously, it's really looking for course materials, references to course materials. Going into a little bit more about what it is designed to do, it is designed to pull links from the original file. So I have a couple of examples here. You can see in this, the link is, this is a clickable link on the original PDF. So the URL is in there, but it's not displaying. So it is looking for those types of URLs. We have that here as well. I have seen some situations where if there's a gap, like if there's a reference and then maybe below that there's actually the URL, sometimes it seems to miss that type of link, but it is meant to be pulling the links from the original file where they exist. So that's something that I think you should be aware of as well. And then this is the thing that I referred to before, adding metadata from above. This is something that we see quite a lot in the different files that we used to kind of build this feature out, where there might be a section, actually my original writing course had that as well. There's a section of kind of required readings or, purchase these books or whatever it might be. And then below there's weekly assignments. And we see a lot of this type of thing. This TEFR refers to a book that is mentioned earlier in the document. So it is designed to run that check to see, can we identify what this is? The Essential Feminist Reader is what it is in this case. It's pulling that information from elsewhere in the document. It's not pulling it from, the web or making it up. It is pulling it from earlier up in the document. I've gotten a lot of feedback on this, both positive and negative feedback on this. I think sometimes this is very useful. Where we see it to be kind of the most useful is where your weekly readings might be, an article and a book and a video, or an article and a chapter and a video, and kind of a combination of different things. And one of them is a chapter from this textbook or this, key text, and many of them are not. So in that case, I do think it's helpful to see, these are my opinions, but I do think it's helpful, and I've gotten this feedback as well, that it's helpful to see this kind of within the context of the weekly readings. But where I think this is less helpful is with something like this, where you can see that there's this table, and then within the table, it's basically a bunch of chapters from the same book, or in this case, there's actually 2 books for this. So it's a bunch of chapters from the same book. And what we get in Leganto is just one section with, it's 27 references here, but I think it's 2 books. So it's like half of that from one book, half of it from another. Introduction, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. So the feedback that I got on this is, that this is really a lot of extra information that doesn't add a lot of value for the student. But the other piece of feedback that I got about this in general is what it means for your processing workflows. If you now have, 27 references and it's actually only 2 books, what does that mean from the library side in terms of reporting, like reporting on what's being used, the number of library materials that are being used. What does it mean in terms of, if I purchase this, I'm really only purchasing it once, even though it's here 27 times. So I have heard some feedback on that. I'd be happy to hear more feedback on this as well if you have any comments on what this means for you, or your preference for how this should work. At this point, I'm just pointing it out so that you know that this is something we're sort of listening for, paying attention to, but that it is doing this on purpose, because of the desire to look for those weekly assignments, or however the course is structured. So that's everything that is happening within the generative AI. And then the last step here is the matching to the library collections. And when we worked with, we did work with, excuse me, some design partners on this feature in general. And the feedback that we got at that point was that it is very risky to link to the wrong thing. If you link to the wrong thing, it can be very difficult to identify that that has happened, because you're looking at the reading list, the metadata might have already updated. The link might point to what the metadata says it is, but maybe it's not actually what was in the original file. So it's difficult to find those things where it's linked to the wrong thing, and also to unpick them. So the way that we have it set to match to your collection is first based on the ISBN. Look for a match on the ISBN. If you don't find one, look for a match on the title and the author and the year. If you still don't find one, look for a match on the title and the author. So that's what it is looking for. It's pretty precise in terms of the title and the author information. So if it's not an exact match, it won't link. So it is looking in that order. So if it can find a match based on those parameters, it will. For those of you who are very familiar with the resource locate settings, the settings after this might be a little bit different than how you have this set up in general. This is something that's set in the system specifically for the Syllabus Assistant, that when it finds a match, it will merge the metadata. So what this means is it keeps the original metadata from the file, but if there's additional metadata in ALMA, on your ALMA bib records, it will add that metadata to the citation. So you may be seeing some of that in your testing. And then also the priority is set. So it's set up to link first to your electronic records, and then your print records, and then your digital. So that's the priority that's set in the system for the linking to the library collections. There is also a process to resolve to the CDI records. So this is generally not the ALMA bib record, but an article or a chapter, or whatever else you might have in CDI. And this is the same as Leganto Works for Everything, but I pulled this information in here. So it's either a combination of the ISSN, the volume, the issue, the start page, and the publication year, or the ISBN or the DOI. We do see a lot of DOIs in the syllabus files. We see some ISBNs, but definitely lots of references that don't have ISBNs as well. So, when you're looking at ISSN, volume, issue, start page, and publication year, it's very unlikely that that's the information that the instructor is putting into their original file. I don't think we see too many that actually have the ISSN. So sometimes this is linking and sometimes it's not, is basically what I want to say here. And here now you know why. There is the manage link to library option. So this was made available earlier this year. And this is a great option where you may have these in your library collection, and for whatever reason it can't make that match automatically. There's a new option here to link them back to your library inventory. So it keeps all of the the place in the list, the notes, the tags, but essentially adds in the library inventory when you've selected, yes, this is the right one. It adds that linking information and connects it with your library. A couple things that we have learned from you. So as we've been, getting feedback from you, we found a couple of issues that either are resolved or are getting resolved quickly. There was a bug on the APAC servers. I'm not sure if we have anybody on this session that would be running on those APAC servers, but there was a bug on the APAC environment. It's been resolved in production, but not yet in the sandbox release. So the sandbox release will get installed on Sunday when the June release gets installed on the sandbox. But it was basically just giving an error. So if you tried it and your Alma is on the APAC servers, try again in production. That's where the fix is at this point, or try again next week in the sandbox. So again, that's been resolved. There was also an issue that we found where files had table of contents. This was related to the way that we were scanning for the section information. Table of contents essentially mean that there's two sections with the same name because it's in the original table of contents and then it's further down in the file when it's actually that section. So there was an issue with those files where it wasn't working. Also diacritics. So this is another thing that we found, in languages that use diacritics, those diacritics were just getting removed. So this is also something that we're fixing now. And then the last thing that came, from your testing is content filtering. And if you've used ChatGPT or Copilot or one of the many other options that are available, you maybe have run into this, or you can certainly run into it on purpose. There's some kind of media around how these services, these generative AI services, are designed not to talk about certain topics, topics where they don't want to be giving you advice or helping you with I don't know how to phrase this, but helping you with, there's certain topics that are just sort of off limits in the generative AI services. And we have seen a very small amount of this in the files that you are testing. The one that comes to mind is a course that included, it was a course, I believe, about the Holocaust, and it included references to genocide. And this triggered the content filter. So it is something that we're still working on, and I'm taking it with the Clarivate academic AI team. We do understand that there's a lot of courses being taught in universities, colleges and universities that might trigger a content filter. But at this point, I want you to know that that is what's happening. It's kind of baked into the generative AI itself, that it has these content filters in it. What we are going to do is add an error message so that at least you're not in a situation where you're kind of continuing to try on the same course when it's just not going to work because of this filter. So we are able to identify when that's the problem, and we'll be adding in an error message with some sort of language about why this is not working. So that's something that we're still working on. We do also have some open questions at this point. One of them is about how to handle references to chapters. We originally had this as books. I think I won't go back in my slides, but we originally had these coming in as books with a note that said chapter 13. When we watched our design partners work, they were changing these to chapter references. So we're working on, whether we should have them come in as chapter references like you see here, or whether they should come in as book references. We don't quite know what it's going to end up being at this point. It might shift a bit as we kind of play with it and experiment a little bit. One of the issues that we ran into is there's not always good information here. It really depends on what's in the file and how the instructor is kind of directing the students to what to read. So sometimes it looks very nice and sometimes it looks a little bit less nice. So we're trying to figure out what's the most efficient way to do it, essentially, from your side. Should you have any feedback, please let us know. But then the other piece that's still an open question for us is, what does all of this mean for your reserves workflows? So I got some feedback that if the instructor is creating these citations one by one, they're getting the Leganto questions, for example. So they get a pop-up that says, what do you want us to do with this item? And they're forced to answer this type of question. So when we're bringing this in all automatically, they're not getting those prompts along the way for how they want to handle specific scenarios, or copyright requests or digitization requests or things like that that are sort of built into the Leganto workflows. We're missing those here. So this is something we're aware of. I don't have an answer for you today, but I want you to know that we are aware of this. Same thing, if you have feedback on this or how this impacts you or what you'd be looking for, please do let us know. Before we move into what's coming, I want to talk a little bit about, I have this as tips for success, but this is really based on what I've seen when I'm talking to, or when we're watching people use this, and we have done that. We have watched people use this or talked to people about this. So some things to be aware of, or some things to think about. I have this try more than once, but not too many times. I have seen situations, um, you know, with the Syllabus Assistant where you try the file once and it doesn't work, and you try it a second time and it does work. Or you try the file once and it gets 10 of the 50 citations, and you try it a second time and it gets all 50. So I have seen some variation here, but I also have this don't try it too many times. For example, I saw something where it was, we tried it like this, and then we edited the file like this, and then we put it in a different format like this, and then, on and on and on. And it ended up actually being a content filter that was the problem. So don't try it until you're blue in the face. Try it maybe twice, probably not more than 3 times. At that point, I would say, something else is happening. There's some sort of bug or issue with that type of file. So don't, necessarily keep trying a bunch of different ways. If you find files that don't work, that simply don't work, please do send them to us, so you can send them to me. You can open a support ticket with the file, but we are trying to find as many of these kind of oddities as we can and resolve them as quickly as we can. So if you have files that just flat out don't work, please do let us know, because we want to get the broadest set of files supported that we can. The second one here is, the Syllabus Assistant is really designed to mimic the original syllabus. And I talked about this in terms of the sections. When we were working with our early design partners on this, we got a lot of kind of feedback that was like, this isn't the way that we would build the list. This isn't the structure that we would have built the list in. Even we wouldn't have put all of these resources on the list. So this is really kind of a different way of thinking about what Leganto is, and it's thinking about it more from the perspective of the instructor or from the perspective of the student. I'm not saying you have to do this, but I want you to kind of think about this in light of the Syllabus Assistant. It is meant to copy what is in the source file, including the structure, including all of the references, including those weekly readings. So today you might not have duplicate titles on a reading list. You might only have the book and not necessarily the individual chapters of the book. But from the student perspective, the file that they're getting from their instructor does have those individual chapters. So maybe think about or try to think about this from the perspective of the course and supporting the course, and less maybe the course reserves or traditional course reserves where this is the book for this course, or these are the 2 books for this course. Certainly it can still be that, but because it's the syllabus, you're also getting all of that additional context and all of that additional structure coming directly from the instructor and directly from the way that they think about their course. We also got the comment from some of our early access customers or design partners that it feels more like the review that you do after rollover compared to creating a reading list from scratch. So that might be a helpful way to think about it. Like, rather than, I have this new course from my instructor and now I need to build it, to think about it more like the instructor's teaching this again and I need to sort of review it and make sure that everything looks okay. So that might be helpful as you're thinking about these lists. I already talked about the link to library options, so I won't go into that one again, but this is a nice way to take what you can get out of the AI, and then in a couple of steps kind of have this be a link to the library collection. What's nice about the link to library is that it essentially runs the library search for you. So rather than having to, copy and paste information from the source file or retype information from the source file, it will check your library for, it'll check your discovery for, based on the title and the author. So it starts that process for you, and then it's you as the human saying, yes, this is the right one. So I think it's a nice, more streamlined way to find these references in your library collections. And then the last one that I have here is don't be afraid to delete, and don't be afraid to delete in bulk. And I'm calling this out. This example that I have here is actually the one where it had, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, and so on in this schedule of assignment section. So there's actually 2 unique titles on this reading list. If you don't want to see all of the other stuff that came through, all of the references to specific chapters, you don't have to. So I just want to remind you that there is the bulk delete option in Leganto. You can delete citations in bulk. You can delete sections in bulk as well. You just have to collapse them down to see this. So I don't know at this point what is more time consuming for you, to run it through the syllabus file and get this and then delete these 2 sections, or to just add these 2 citations from scratch. 2 is not that many. If you have, 10, it might be more, saving you more time. I would be really curious to get your feedback on kind of the time aspect of this, reviewing their lists versus just making them yourselves. I'd be really curious about that. But I do want you to maybe think about this. We've seen some really long files. We've seen files that have, more than 40 pages and broken down into many sections, and the references are kind of peppered throughout as opposed to like all in one place. So that can be a lot of work for you to kind of go through and find all of these individual resources. So it may be easier to start with what you get from the Syllabus Assistant, even if it requires some editing or some deleting. And maybe not, and let me know if that's the case as well. And then the last thing that I have here is more just to call out that this might help you out. This is something that will be resolved in the future. But for now, something to be aware of is when you're pasting references, it might help if you add a section header like I have in this example here. Because of the way that it's kind of trained or prompted to look at the original file, it is looking for this structure. I've played with it a lot and I've had luck both ways, but I'll say in general, I have a little bit more luck when I have a section here. So if you are trying to do this and the pasting just isn't working for you, try this and see if it helps. It doesn't have to be, much of a section header, but just something to indicate that, these are the assigned readings for this course. Again, we're playing with this. I think we'll resolve this in the future, but for now, so that you can start using it, so that you can start testing it, I just wanted to point it out. I see a question in the chat. Is the Syllabus Assistant compatible with Simple Syllabus? I am making some guesses on what Simple Syllabus is based on some other questions that I'm getting, but I'm making the assumption that it is something that kind of structures the syllabus for you in a specific way. If I'm wrong, please let me know. We're not working with any specific system, any specific like syllabus making system, but if you can make a file of course materials somewhere else, whether it's just in Word or in a dedicated tool, and then export that information out into one of the options that we have. We support, again, the PDF, Word, text file, or the option to paste references like you see here. So if you can do that with whatever your source is, then you'd be able to use those files. So we're not doing dedicated testing or dedicated integrations with any specific tools, but I think the output of those tools is data that you would be able to use in Leganto. If not, let me know. So let me go now into what's coming in the future. So I'm sure this is the piece that you're probably most interested in, is what's coming next. So we have a couple of things that we'll be adding that are really still relevant for library staff workflows. As we've been working with you through this beta release, we found a few additional requests or things that we want to support to be able to make this more flexible for different situations. And the first one is the option to paste references to an existing list. And this is actually coming in June, so you'll have this very soon. But we heard, we already have a list for this course. We rolled it over. We don't want to have to start from scratch. We do want to, add maybe one more section, or add these 5 references, or something like that. So we will have that option in June. You'll be able to paste references to a specific section of an existing list. But the other thing that's coming later this year is the option to add all of the references from a file to an existing list. We also got feedback that many of you are creating blank lists for instructors, or nearly blank lists for instructors. You just want to have the basic framework. This is the list name. It's now linked to your course. It uses the template that we always use. So we'll be adding the option in Q3 to add a file to an existing list. So if you have a situation where you already have a list for the course, whether there's references on it or not, you'll be able to import a file. It'll pull all of the sections and all of the citations from that file, and it will add them to the bottom of the list. There's a question related to this. Does the Syllabus Assistant dedupe references if they're repeated in the syllabus? It doesn't, and it's not meant to do, at this point, it's not meant to do that. So it is adding these as duplicate citations. Again, happy to get your feedback on that, but the main reason that we're doing this is to support those like weekly reading assignments. So if something is, chapter 1 is part of week 2 and chapter 2 is part of week 3, but there's other readings in those sections, we don't want to skip these. So that's really the main reason that we did add it. At this point, it's not doing the dedupe. Somebody asked me in the first session of this webinar related to what I'm showing right now, add a file to an existing list, if it will check what's already on the list and only add the additional resources. And we're also not doing that at this point. And we're not looking at doing that because there's quite a lot of nuance to that. If the metadata is not an exact match, but it's the same item, is it considered a duplicate or not? If one of them the one on the existing list has a tag and the one coming in from the syllabus doesn't have a tag, which one are we bringing in? So what we're planning to add later this year is really just all of the references and all of the sections from the new list. So if you have a situation where that's not what you want, you already have a pretty built out list and you just want to add a few, then this first option might be a better fit for you, just pasting the additional references into the list. So these are 2 things that are coming that are still pretty closely tied to library workflows. And that's really what we have today, is a workflow where the library is building lists for instructors or doing a very extensive review for instructors. And over the second half of the year, we're kind of easing into a workflow where the instructors can do it themselves. We want this to be ready for them by the time we open it up for instructors. I think that we're sort of working under the assumption that library staff is going to have additional training in terms of how Leganto works, training such as this webinar. I wouldn't necessarily expect that every instructor would need additional training before they're using the system. So we are looking for kind of very intuitive ways for instructors to be able to start using this themselves. I see a question in the chat that's related to this. Right now, it's not open to instructors or to faculty members. It's only available for the library staff to use. So this is what we're working toward. A couple of things that we know we need to do or that we are planning to do to kind of work toward that. The first one here is that the instructor will be able to upload a file, which is then going to be reviewed by the library. So what this is something that we have already. So when they start in the learning management system, one of the options here is to ask your library to create your list for you. And what happens today is it sends the file to the library, it creates a list that has one reference on it, and the reference is this file, and then the library would go through and create the list from there. But starting in July, there will be the option to have this feature, this workflow, use the Syllabus Assistant. So from the instructor side, they would see, ask your library to create your file or to create your list like we do here. They would be prompted to upload their file, but that's actually where it stops. At the endpoint, they get a message that says, thank you so much, the library will work on this for you. The behind the scenes, it runs it through the Syllabus Assistant, and it creates it as a new list for the library to take a look at, but it's a list that's basically already created. And in this case, again, it's that review workflow. So it's saving the step of the instructor having to give you the file, you having to upload it into the system. But if anything goes wrong along the way, the instructor doesn't know that. We're not showing them any error messages. We're really just sending the file to the library. So it's still very much a library completed workflow, if you will, but it's just starting in a different place. So it's starting with the instructor saying like, yes, I want you to create this list and here's my file. So that's the first piece. Again, this is coming in July. To support this, we're adding a couple of new things. The first is that we realize we do need to store the file. We're storing the file in Leganto, not in the AI. And I want to really stress this because I have gotten a lot of concern about, are you using my data to train your AI? Is it going to be stored in the AI? Is it going to be preserved in the AI? Will this eventually, get resurfaced in a different way because it's in AI? No. So that's not what we're talking about here. We're really talking about just the file itself. We realize that if the instructor is sending the file to you and something goes wrong, or if you have some questions, or if you need to refer back to the original file, we saw this quite a lot in our kind of early testing with customers, where someone would say like, what is this? And then they'd go look back to the original file to see what it was. So we realized that you need to have that file. So we'll be adding this in as part of this option. And the other thing that we'll be adding is the data or an indication inside the ALMA task lists. So you saw the indication already in the Leganto interface, but also in the ALMA task lists. There'll be a facet on the reading list screen. There'll also be a column on the reading list screen. There'll be an indication when you're looking at the list of citations. These kind of additional pieces of those task lists are hidden by default. So if you don't want to see them, you don't have to. But we want you to be able to see, like, this is a list that was created by AI. Maybe you need to review it a little bit differently than you would if you knew that a human had created it. So we want to expose that information to you, as well as the analytics. We'll have that data in analytics. There's a question, will the faculty member know in July that their syllabus is going through Gen AI? Yes. So when they go to upload the file, that's the screen that you see today where it says, it has that text at the bottom that says this feature uses generative AI, we're not storing your information. Link here for more details. That screen will still display. So they'll be able to see that it is going to run their file through AI. So this is the first step of the instructor workflow. It's still, like I said before, very much still processed by the library. And we're moving toward a workflow where the instructor could do all of the work themselves. And there's a couple things that we know we need to have before we can, before we get to that point. So the first one is a different entry point for the instructor. Today, the option to upload a syllabus is quite hidden. I'll tell you, this isn't entirely an accident. There was a conversation on the listserv recently that was like, this isn't very intuitive that I would look for it here. And that's not entirely an accident. We wanted you to feel comfortable turning it on. Even when we were working with our early design partners, I think only one person in the library often was actually using it. Technically, everyone with the library roles would have been able to, but it's not something that you're likely to just stumble upon and discover. And when we open this up, when we feel it's kind of fully baked and ready for prime time, when it's ready, to really be used, we want to have this more prominent. We believe it's a really useful starting point for the instructor, so we want to make that more clear that this is an option to them as a starting point. So we'll have some sort of new entry point for the instructor. And then the other thing that we know we need is more of a wizard-like approach for citations that don't link to the library. So today we have the manage link to library option, but it requires that you know that that's the next step. It requires that you know how to do that and what you're doing and why you're doing it. And we don't expect that, again, instructors would have this level of training for, how to use Leganto. So we're thinking about something that's more like a wizard. The mock-up that you see here is a mock-up. It's something that we're kind of doing usability testing on right now. So it might not look exactly like this, but we're kind of thinking about a way to walk the instructor through the steps that they need to complete. So it's not just uploading the file, there's next steps that are along this way. So this is something that we're working toward for the end of the year to kind of get toward this instructor-driven approach. I think I just have one more slide here, and I want to kind of wrap up with this because this is really a shift. I hope you can see here, this is really a shift in the way that someone would start using Leganto, or the way that you might even market Leganto to your instructors. I don't have all the answers. I just have a couple of kind of phrases here that I'm thinking about, or that I hear some of you thinking about. Feel free to add your own if you're thinking of something differently here. But this is kind of getting back to sort of the core of what Leganto is and how you're marketing Leganto on your campus. Today I think we get a lot of feedback that instructors have already created all of this information and now they need to recreate it in another system, so that the library has the data. So this is really a shift in how you're presenting Leganto to instructors. You may not be ready for this yet, but I do want you to kind of start thinking about this. For now, the marketing might be send us your syllabus and we'll link everything we can to the library. Upload your syllabus, we'll do the rest. We'll purchase what we can, whatever the services that you provide behind the scenes. But in this case, we're starting with existing data. We're starting with data that they've already selected. They've already selected what they want to use in their course, potentially not even thinking about the library collections or what might be available through the library or what the library could provide access to. So we really want to think about that as the starting point. Like, they've already done this work. They've already, made these selections. We want to make it easier for you to get the data, for the library to get the data, for the students to get the links, and also for the instructor to know how much the library is providing here, how much access, how much of these resources are available because they're part of the library collections. So that's something to think about moving forward as we kind of shift into this instructor flow. If you do turn that on and take advantage of that, that would be potentially another shift in how you're talking about this to instructors and thinking about it in terms of the value that it offers to them. Upload your syllabus and check for links to the library, for example. At its core, that's really what we're doing here. Upload your syllabus and link it to the library collections. This is what we're doing with the Syllabus Assistant. That's really the idea behind Leganto as well. Put in the things that you're using and it will have these links for your students. They'll be able to access it through your library. You may have additional services that you offer on top of that for purchasing or scanning or copyright or whatever else it may be. But it's, again, just a different starting point. So this may be something to start thinking about now, even though, again, this isn't ready at this point for instructors to use. It may be something still to start thinking about how you want to talk about this tool when you're talking about it to instructors. With that, we do have, looks like about 10 minutes for questions. And I know there's some in the chat that I haven't answered yet, so I'm going to back all the way up to the top and make sure that I didn't miss anything. I kind of skipped around and picked up a few of them as I was going. Does the Syllabus Assistant correct incorrect information in references? It does do this, and it kind of caught us by surprise, actually, because when we were first working on this, we had a list of what the right answer was going to be. So, in this file, this is the right answer for what all of the references, the references that should be pulled out and the data that should be in those references. And occasionally we were flagging errors where it wasn't a direct match. I can think of an example where the author was wrong. The author's name in the original syllabus was actually wrong, and when it came in through the Syllabus Assistant, it got corrected. I actually created that writing course that I've been using as an example is a file that I created. because I wanted to have something that wasn't anybody else's work. So I created this file, and I put a typo in there on purpose for the Stunk chapter 2 or whatever. The author's name is actually Strunk. And I had that typo in, and it is fixing it. So it will make corrections. It is pretty heavily prompted not to make stuff up, but we do see situations where it will correct information in the references. I don't see this a lot, but I am seeing it a little bit. So that's something to be aware of. I wouldn't necessarily rely on this, as the fail safe. But if you notice that, there's some mismatch between the original file and what you're getting in Leganto, it may not be that it's making this up. It might be actually that it's making a correction for you. So let's see what else. Can the faculty member use it? Not yet. Can the syllabus assistant be turned off? Yes. I see it. Can the syllabus assistant be turned off? Yes. So the right now it's off by default. So you would have to turn it on if it's something that you want to start testing. It will display only to library staff. If you turn it on and change your mind, you can turn it off at any point. You'll continue to be able to turn it on or turn it off. As we add in these additional levels that I'm talking about, those will also be things that you opt into. So in the July release, when we're using that send your file to the library option, if you want that feature to use the syllabus assistant, you'll opt into that. So you'll have to specifically say that you want to use that. When we add it for instructors, that's something that you will opt into as well. So you'll always be able to opt into this. It's off by default. But again, if you turn it on, you can turn it back off again. So you're not kind of stuck once you turn it on. I see a comment here that says, can you repeat that question? But I didn't see when this came in, so I'm sorry. I don't know what the question was. Okay, now it says, never mind. Okay, I'll try to be a little slower as I'm reading the questions. Sorry about that. So then there's a question. You mentioned that the syllabus file is stored in Leganto. Can we see it? This would be helpful to compare and confirm if the faculty eventually do the syllabus assistant themselves. Yes, you will be able to see it. Let me actually back up to this screen here. So it's going to be stored and visible in Leganto. So it'll have this list assisted by AI indication as well as the file. And you'll be able to download the file and look at the file. So this is something that we're adding. I think this may actually be coming in June. And the other thing that's going to be here is sorry, I just blanked. If this is multiple files, so if you are pasting references, for example, or you're pasting, references to different sections, that data will come in as well, because we realize that this is probably something you'll need to be able to do to see, what was the source information. Does this match the source information? So you will be able to see that information. It won't display to students, so they'll never see the original files or the original references, but you will be able to see that information. Okay, and then what's the LLM model that this uses? So right now we're using the Clarivate Academic AI platform. Let me just skip ahead here so that I have my email address back on the screen. So right now we're using the Clarivate Academic AI platform, which uses Azure. Behind the scenes, we're using, I think actually 2 of the different GPT models. It is built that we can change this out though. So as new models are released, we can take advantage of that new technology. If we were to switch to a different platform in the future, for some reason, we can kind of change it. So that's the way it's working right now, but it is designed to be flexible in the future if we need to, for whatever reason, change this out and use a different platform. Do you have any general language for talking to faculty about assuring their intellectual property is secure, getting agreements for them to use? So what we have right now is the text that displays. I'm going to stop sharing for a second here. and pull this up. What we have right now is the text that displays when you upload the file. Let me just log in here and I'll share my screen again. Let's see, share. So I think you should see Leganto now, or soon. Okay. So when you go to upload a file or import a list, it displays this information here. Let me zoom this in a little bit, that it uses large language models. We have your inputs not stored by the large language model or used for any other purpose than to build the list. It's not used to directly or indirectly change or train the LLM. So this is the language that we have. You can't change this. It is not customizable. But this is the language that we have. It does also link out to the Clarivate privacy information and disclaimer about generative AI within Clarivate. If you need something else, let me know. I'll say this is what we have today, and this is the language that I've been using. Um, the AI that we're using is pre-trained, so we're not training the AI. We are prompting the AI. So we have a prompt on top of a pre-trained AI that is, doing what I just talked about, looking for the sections, looking for the course materials, augmenting the partial references, and so on. It's doing all of the things that I talked through, but it's not looking at the results. We're not feeding the AI, your results or using the original files to kind of retrain the AI. We're not doing that in any way. And where I talk about like today, I've talked about, we found this problem and we're adjusting it. What we're doing is we're adjusting the prompting. We're not again feeding your files in to say, look at something like this and do this instead. It's already trained on the data and we're adjusting the prompting. So I do think that there's a little bit more information in this AI policy. This is how Clarivate as a whole is working with generative AI. Now I have to find my chat again. So I'll put this link in the chat so that you have it, especially if you don't have it turned on. So you'll have that link and you can see that information. But that's what we have now related to their content. And I do know that this is a concern. We heard this a lot when we were working with early testers. Are you using my data to train your AI? That's the question that I heard kind of first and always. So we're trying to be as clear as we can that we're not doing that. I think, to be very honest with you, I think there are probably people who will never want their file in the AI, no matter how many times we tell them that we're not doing that. But hopefully that language is at least a good starting point for most people, or for some people. Again, let me know if you feel otherwise. And actually, I'm looking at the clock and I realized that we are right on time. Oh, wait. So it says, just looking at that policy, it says Clarivate will not use the content to train the models, but is there any guarantee that the AI models themselves will not be training on this content? Clarivate doesn't control ChatGPT's decisions. So the way that the academic AI platform works is, I can't remember the acronym. Maybe somebody can look it up. It's RAG. I can't remember what it stands for, so I apologize for that. But essentially, there's a separation between the actual training process and the data that we're putting into it. So there's an extra level here where we're getting access to a pre-trained AI model, and we can feed it information. So for example, you can say, this is the file, or these are the articles that I want you to check, or whatever it may be. You can feed it information, but that information isn't actually going back to the original, training of the platform. So there is a separation there. Thank you. Retrieval Augmented Generation. That's what it stands for. It's also used in the Primo Research Assistant. There's the ProQuest Research Assistant. And I think that this is very consistent also across non-Clarivate tools as well, this separation between your private data, your personal data, or in our case, the data of different vendors or publishers that are in Primo. There's a separation between all of that data and the training process. So it is designed to pull that out and sever that. It doesn't send that information back to ChatGPT, for example. Okay, I am now a little bit over, so I'll just say thank you. I will be sending an email probably later today with the recording and also that survey that I mentioned. So I would be very curious to get your feedback. Please take the time to fill it out. It's pretty short. Feel free to fill it out. If you have multiple people from your institution, you can fill it out multiple times. We really want as much feedback as we can possibly get. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Bye, everybody.